By watching today's video, you will become a better player. Doesn't matter if you already play Riftbound a lot or if you're a new player coming from Magic the Gathering, there's something to learn. Let's go. In the first expansion of Riftbound, it was not possible to reduce a unit's might below 1. Cards like Smokescreen, even though they were giving -4 might to a unit, it was always minimum 1. But in the new expansion, Spiritforge, cards like Frigid Touch will be actually able to reduce a unit's might to 0. The thing is, when you compare it to other card games like Magic the Gathering, for example, that will still not kill a creature. A creature or a unit with a 0 might still has to be dealt damage. So you will have to play a Hextech Ray on a unit that has 0 might to kill it, or you would have to deal combat damage to it to make sure that it gets destroyed. One of the biggest differences between Riftbound and other card games like Magic, for example, will be the fact that when I play a creature like Stalwart Poro, for example, I am not opening a chain because it doesn't have an effect. It only has a keyword. So essentially it's a vanilla creature. When I play a unit like that, my opponent cannot respond in any way. But if I play, for example, Riptide Rex, which says when you play me deal 6 damage to an enemy unit at a battlefield, that will open a chain that will allow my opponent to respond with cards like reactions. Which is very important because in Riftbound there's no end step. So if my only play is actually gonna be the Poro and then I pass to my opponent, he's not gonna be able to play any card during my turn, even though he has cards that he could play otherwise. For example, he would like to play Discipline to just cycle a card. No way of doing that because I didn't give him a chain to actually use a reaction. This would change, of course, if I would go to a battlefield, for example, which would allow him to play action cards and reaction cards. But if my play is only doing a Poro and that's it, then there's no end step to react as well. One of the most common mistakes in Riftbound is not understanding when can you play an action card. For example, you cannot play an action to react to an action. If my opponent is playing a Hextech Ray to destroy my Stalwart Poro, I am not able to use Falling Comet to destroy his unit in response. I need to wait for this Hextech Ray to resolve, kill my unit, and then I'll be able to play my action card when the priority passes to me. Obviously though, when an opponent plays a Hextech Ray to my Poro, I'm able to respond with a Discipline because it has reaction. Side note, I do think that cards that have reaction keyword, they should have a different color than a cards that have action keyword because they have exactly the same color. They should be different. Another big contrast to other card games are gonna be cards like Ravenbloom Student or Darius Trifarian, which do have the text when you play your second card or when you play a spell. Now the difference here is that in Riftbound, a card is only played if it gets to be resolved. So for example, if I play Cleave as my second card, but it gets Windwalled and it gets countered, then my Darius Trifarian will not untap because the card didn't get to be played. The same accounts to Ravenbloom Student. If I play Cleave and my opponent will use a Defy to cancel the Cleave, then my Ravenbloom Student will not get the +1 might because I didn't play this spell. It needs to be resolved in Riftbound to actually count for that. But this is also why cards like Darius Trifarian will actually see themselves when they're being played, because that means that the card is being resolved, right? So you're gonna be able to play Darius Trifarian as your second card during the turn, so he will enter the game and trigger to untap himself. Next one is gonna be Reflexive Triggers. That is a confusing topic for many people, and if you want to read a little bit more about it, you can check out the paragraph 379 in the comprehensive rules. But in general, Reflexive Triggers can be recognized by the phrase do this n times or do one of the following. Like for example, Falling Star has the text do this twice, deal 3 damage to a unit. I will try to visualize how a reflexive trigger on a Falling Star works so you can understand it a little bit better. So, when I play Falling Star, my opponent can respond to me playing Falling Star before I actually do something with the card itself. That's the first window of opportunity that opens the chain. Now, after my opponent passes and Falling Star resolves, the card itself creates triggers. Falling Star in this case will create 2, deal 3 to a unit. Now I can choose the units, and that will create also a chain that my opponents will be able to react. Each of them is a separate effect that will be able to be separately reacted to. You have to remember that those triggers are being created by the card and they are not a spell themselves. So if my opponent wanted to counter Falling Star, he would have to use the Wind Wall before it triggers the effect, which means that as a Kai'Sa player, you should be playing Falling Star, asking for reactions. If your opponent passes, then you choose your targets. This also creates another form of interaction where, for example, if I play an Ikafian Rain or a Falling Star and my opponent in response to my casts uses a retreat on his own unit, then I will have, upon resolution of my Falling Star or Ikafian Rain, target units on the board. Now, if I have, for example, one unit, then I have to target it the amount of times that Falling Star or Ikafian Rain requires me to. If I will have two units on the board, for example, I will have this Ravenbloom Student and the Chemtech Enforcer, that means that will have to target at least one of those creatures. I could target both and kill both of my creatures, but we would like to do that. Also remember that Student will only trigger upon the play of a spell, not upon resolution of the reflexive triggers. So even though Ikafian Rain will deal it 6 times, it will only trigger Student once. In Spiritforge though, there's gonna be a card called Not So Fast that is gonna be able to be played after a resolution of a Falling Star to counter one of its effects, because those are abilities that Not So Fast can target, which is a very interesting interaction and can be used strategically. The next thing about reflexive triggers is something that people unknowingly cheat in games because they're not aware how it works. When you play a Falling Star on the Solari Chief at a Dreaming Tree, you're not gonna draw a card, because the Dreaming Tree says the first time you choose a friendly unit with a spell here each turn, draw 1. You're not targeting the unit with the spell. The spell creates the triggers, and then the trigger targets the card, which means that an ability is targeting Solari Chief, not a spell. The same happens with the Ikafian Rain and cards that have reflexive triggers overall. So be very aware of doing this, because it might actually cost you games, or you may unknowingly cheat and draw too many cards because you think that is actually targeting your unit. Another great example of differences between the rules in Riftbound and other card games is gonna be, for example, when I play a Void Seeker on a unit at a battlefield, and then my opponent will use a retreat to get this unit to his hand, or maybe use a Fight or Flight to move the unit to its base, or any other card like that, the Void Seeker will still do the card draw, because it does resolve and it doesn't fizzle in this game. You do as much as you can from the text on the card. Moving your unit to an empty battlefield will trigger something that is different from your normal showdown. It's gonna be called Open Showdown, which will not have attackers and defenders. So for example, keywords like Assault will not trigger, which means that your Chemtech Enforcer will still be at 2 might, and your opponent now will be able to play his action card during the Open Showdown to kill your Chemtech Enforcer because the Assault didn't trigger. Simply saying, Open Showdowns don't have attackers or defenders. Deflect is an optional keyword. So for example, if I have the Pouty Poro on my opponent's side and I play Ikafian Rain and I target it 6 times, I don't have to pay 6 times for the deflect. I will just pay once to kill it because it will be dealt 2 times, and then the next 5 times I target it, I choose not to pay the deflect cost, so the damage just doesn't happen. The same happens, for example, with a Leona that targets a unit to be stunned when she attacks. She can just choose not to stun the unit because she will not pay the deflect cost. The next topic is healing. Now let's say opponents used a spell that puts 2 damage on Sprite Mortar and 2 damage on the Blazing Scorcher. And now my opponent will actually attack into the Dreaming Tree, triggering a showdown and dealing the lethal damage to the Sprite Mortar. During the combat cleanup, when this is being resolved, this creature on the other side of the map is also being healed, because all units heal in the combat cleanup of showdowns. It doesn't matter in which location they are, so they can be in base or on other location or other battlefield, and they will still heal. This is incredibly important. It will come up in your games. You have to remember this. In Spiritforge, we're gonna be getting gear that can be attached to units, which is also found in other card games, like for example in Magic the Gathering. The biggest difference though in Riftbound is that if I'm gonna attach an equipment to a unit, I cannot unattach it just like because I want it to. So the unit has to die, or an effect has to happen, like for example a legend that unattaches equipment from units to actually get rid of this equipment and put it in the base or to another unit. You cannot just do it on your own. If you have example of rules that you think people don't know or should know, let me know in the comments. I'll be happy to learn myself. Thanks for watching and see you next time.